Go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a new phase of Emergency Alerting Webinar Series, Part 3, How to Minimize Alerting Delays. My name is LJ Wilson, and I'm the Outreach and Communications Specialist for a team that supports Norman Speicher, who works for the Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology Directorate as a Program Manager. By the way, this is our last webinar of the series, so just put that out there. Today's webinar will focus on how to minimize alert delays with the Ipaws Program Planning Toolkit. The toolkit is uniquely tailored to provide the alert warning notification community with guidelines that they will need when implementing emergency response plans that can help alerting authorities nationwide minimize their response times when responding to a crisis situation. Next slide, please. During today's hour and 15-minute webinar, all participants will be able to type in their questions in the Q&A section. Throughout the webinar, we will also ask you to answer poll questions. My colleague Adam will provide more guidance on how to use the Q&A and poll section after we go over the webinar rules. As you are listening to the panelists speak and viewing the corresponding PowerPoint, please mute the sound on your computer. We also respectfully ask that you wait until we get to the question and answer section of the webinar for panelists to answer your questions. And most importantly of all the rules, we want you to enjoy the webinar. Please use the chat section to connect and engage in the topics discussed today. And after the webinar, we will send you the slides and webinar recording in the next several weeks. Now here's my colleague Adam for additional pointers on how to use the Q&A and polling section. Next slide, please.
Thank you, LJ. Yeah, I can quickly go over the QA function and the polling rules for this webinar. So first, the QA function. Please use the QA function for all questions you would like to ask the panelists. The Q&A button can be found at the bottom of your Zoom window. The Q&A tool helps us keep track of which questions have been answered and which have yet to be answered. This function also allows speakers to personally respond to questions and write their own answers directly responding to the question, ensuring that a majority of the questions are answered. Finally, you can like questions by clicking the thumbs up icon next to the question. The questions with the most likes will be moved to the top of the questions list, and this allows speakers to answer the questions that generate the most interest. And you can also like multiple questions, and there's also no limit to the number of questions that you can like. So that's the Q&A section. Now moving to the polling questions. Throughout the webinar, there will be a few polling questions that will appear on your screen. We will be using the polling function throughout the session to ask the group some prepared guided questions. When a poll goes live, you will get a notification on the poll button located on your Zoom toolbar, found at the bottom of your screen. You can then click the poll button and the poll will appear on your screen, and you will have exactly 60 seconds to answer the question. You may answer the question, click submit, and your answer will be submitted and will be anonymous. After 60 seconds, the polls will be closed and the results of the question are shown by the host. You will then be alerted when the next poll goes live. With that information given, I can send this back to LJ.
Thank you, Adam. Now let's get to our speakers. Next slide, please. Norman Speicher is the Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology Director, Program Manager, as I mentioned before. He has more than 25 years of experience in emergency communications, emergency management, and public safety information technology. Prior to his current role, he supported a range of federal programs, including S&T's Wireless Emergency Alerts and the Federal Emergency Management Agency Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. In addition, he has worked with the City of Chicago Office of Emergency Management and served as a communication program manager for Northrop Grumman. Welcome to the panel, Norman. You will also hear from Wade Whitmer, FEMA Deputy Director of the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, Ipaws. Wade has been with the FEMA Ipaws division since January of 2009. The Ipaws division is tasked with implementing an effective, reliable, integrated, flexible, and comprehensive system to alert and warn the American people as outlined in Executive Order 13407. Before joining FEMA, he was employed with the Defense Information Systems Agency for 9 years, serving as the portfolio manager for mobile communications in the Presidential Communications Upgrade Program Management Office, and finally as the White House Communications Agency Deputy Director of Enterprise. architecture. He has over 19 years in government systems engineering and government program acquisition experience. Welcome to the panel, Wade. Our next subject matter expert is Jody Smith, who will be joining us shortly. She has served as an Ipods specialist and the Ipods lab project manager for over 10 years. She was an incremental part in the development and implementation of the Ipods lab, which serves all federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial alerting authorities with exercise and training initiatives, along with many other functions in support of the Ipods Program Management Office. Jody travels the country attending specialized engagements at the request of Ipods users and the Ipods Program Management Office. Welcome to the panel, Jody. We are also happy to have Dr. Jeanette Sutton. She is an associate professor, not producer, and director of the Information Science PhD program in the College of Emergency Preparedness, Homeland Security, and Cybersecurity at the University at Albany, SUNY. She is also the director of the Emergency and Risk Communication Message Testing Lab. Dr. Sutton specializes in disaster and risk with a primary focus on online informal communication and public alerts and warnings disseminated via short messaging channels. Much of her research investigates evolving role of information and communication technology, including social media and mobile devices for disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. Her current work is funded for FEMA Ipaws and a host of other agencies centering on messaging design and testing across a range of hazard contexts and human-induced threats for communication via wireless emergency alerts and other alerting channels. Welcome to the panel, Dr. Sutton. We also have a panel participant who helped us pilot the toolkit over the summer, Ryan Hooray, who serves as an assistant telecom officer for the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. During his Q&A with the experts and during the audience Q&A segment, please make note that Ryan is unable to discuss the false missile alert incident in 2018 due to pending litigation with the state of Hawaii. As a precaution, I'm asking the audience to refrain from asking Ryan about this particular incident. Nevertheless, we are excited to bring the informative webinar to our emergency management heroes. I can assure you that all of our speakers will help you learn how the Ipaws Program Planning Toolkit is designed to effectively distribute messages to help minimize alerting delays. Next slide, please. Now to our agenda. Today's agenda will focus on why minimizing alerting delays are important, how to minimize alerting delays using the toolkit. You'll also hear from Dr. Jeanette Sutton, who will provide some research on human behavior and warning response. And from there, we will have a candid conversation with pilot participant Ryan Hooray about his alerting delay stories and his experience using the toolkit. Before we wrap things up, we will give you a chance to ask our panelists questions. Without further ado, I'm going to send it over to my colleague, Sophie. Next slide, please.
Thank you, LJ. So I've got a couple of slides here on the importance of minimizing alerting delays. If you are preparing for a disaster ahead of time, minimizing delays in the moment buys back precious time when the public needs that information to be able to respond safely and prevent their lives and their property from damage. It also provides a safety net for the public to be able to avoid hazards so that they're not in the way of disasters, and then also prepares alerting authorities to be able to quickly deliver that important information to the public right after an emergency happens. You can go to the next slide. So we've got two examples here of the Navajo Nation using an emergency alert, as well as a severe weather statement from a fire tornado warning, which I think it was the first usage of fire tornado ever. So these messages were able to get out quickly and in time for people to react to those disasters. Now I'll go to the next slide and I'll do a little bit of a demonstration of the Ipods Program Planning Toolkit. Perfect. So the purpose of the Ipaws toolkit is to assist public safety agencies with pre-planning before a disaster happens by creating a comprehensive emergency alert plan. So this isn't just for the Ipaws system, although it is the primary function. This is for creating a plan, even if you only have word of mouth as your primary means of alerting your community. It just walks alerting authorities and others that send emergency messages through things that they should consider ahead of sending those messages. It also can help plan for future alerts, warnings, and notifications enhancements, facilitate interoperability, not just across different technologies, but also across different jurisdictions, and then improve information sharing, not just with the public safety agency and the public, but also agency to agency and official to official across the country. So now I'll do the toolkit demonstration. Adam will slide his screen over. All right. So for those who are not aware, the toolkit was launched in November of last year and has been live on FEMA.gov since then. We've spent the last 6 months or so refining the toolkit, talking with stakeholders, piloting and ensuring that everything makes sense, is easy to use, and that there aren't any additions that need to be made. So we will scroll down a little bit here. One of the main updates that has been made, direct stakeholder feedback, is that they wanted to be able to click that link to download a blank template. So it makes it really easy to be able to have it side by side as you're going through the toolkit, or just to use it without the toolkit itself. So we'll click on the Ipods Program Planning Toolkit link there. All right, so the plan walks you through 5 different steps, starting with your system information, moving into your system standard operating procedures. There's step 3 for creating messaging templates, and then training and system tests and exercises. All of this was direct recommendations from alerting authorities, alert originators, social scientists like Dr. Jeanette Sutton, and social science research and general research. S&T has done a lot of research into why these are needed and what should be included. So we'll scroll down a little bit and I'll walk you through how to create your plan. We start off really simple, just asking you who you are, when you prepared the information. You can keep scrolling, Adam. And then why you need the system and the plan itself. So it starts you off with some really softballs to get you started. And then we ask what you're currently using for your systems and tactics to send emergency alert information. So we've got a couple clicked here as an example, but let's click WIA for Ipaws too, if you don't mind. Oh, it was right up there, Adam. Yep, underneath EAS, perfect. So you'll see when we go to the next page, you'll be prompted to insert some additional information. So each system and tactic that you chose, we want to know why you're wanting to use it. What's the purpose? What are the benefits? And then if there's any login or password information that if you've got several people who are authorized to use the system, or if you're the only one, it creates that backup so that someone else can step in very easily and respond to a disaster. Another update that we're making to this page is that not every system that's on that first page needs contact information. So that will be removed only for the ones that are known to have contact information required. So it cuts down on the bulkiness of this form. All right, we'll save and continue. That's another great feature of the toolkit, is that we do have the option to go back or save and continue. Makes it really easy to move forward. So then step 2 is all about standard operating procedures. These were gathered from alerting authorities, alert originators, FEMA current guidelines, and then other states that currently have alerting plans. Minnesota, for example, we used their recommendations within the toolkit. So Starting off with training guidance. You can choose which positions your agency currently has, or if you're filling out the form, which one you are. So we'll click on both, and it gives you the option to talk about training frequency for both positions. If this is happening once a month, once a year, biannually, whatever it is, you've got the opportunity to think about that training frequency there. And there's also suggestions and requirements. So if you are a new alerting authority, there are some things that Ipaws asks you to do, like take trainings, and then the monthly proficiency tests through the Technical Support Services Facility, previously the Ipaws Lab. So then we move into some more credential management guidelines. Like I talked about before, this is all about making sure that things are backed up and in one place so that if the sole person responsible is out or something happens, somebody else can easily step in and make sure that critical information is sent to the public. So this is just login account, username and password. So talking about if that password is going to expire every 6 months, make sure that that's in there. If that password length is between a certain amount of characters, it just prompts people to think about, okay, I remember now it was only 12 characters and it's my son's birthday, whatever it is. But it just helps you think about it in the moment. So we'll just keep scrolling. This is all just suggestions from experts, just like yourselves. And then actually we'll click on add more roles in training. That was another direct suggestion from a stakeholder, is to be able to add as many roles and training schedules as your agency has. Everybody is different, and this is not a one size fits all solution. So we'll keep moving. So we'll slide through the next couple steps pretty quickly, but you can see that it asks you about agreements with other alerting authorities. And Jody and I were just on a call last week talking about additions to mutual aid agreements. So your memorandum of understanding, memorandum of agreement, if you need to do cross-jurisdictional, cross-state alerting, do you have that in place already? Is there a chain of command to have that message approved? So in the next release, we'll have some additional questions around those right here in this section. So we'll just keep scrolling. Again, knowledge redundancy, policy for backing up data. Do you have a message cancellation strategy? I know Dr. Jeanette Sutton will be talking about that a little bit in her section, and then planning for false alerts. So then again, this is all guidelines and management for knowing where things are stored within your local computer, so that other people will be able to access it in case of an emergency. And then message translations. So understanding the languages that are spoken in your area and how are you going to ensure that those are translated accurately ahead of a disaster. All right, so we'll save and continue. Yeah, Chris, I really hope that too. Children's birthdays should not be passwords, and it was a silly example. All right, so then event codes. So everybody who is currently an alerting authority should know which codes your agency is authorized to use. That happens at the alerting authority level, and it's directly tied to your Ipods credentials. So we'll click on a couple of these, Adam, maybe child abduction, blue alert, and one other, just so you can see what prompts below. So for each event code selected, it asks what dissemination system you're using for it. Not everything will be used at all times. And so let's just click WIA for blue alert, and then it asks you for those parameters. So why would you push that blue alert through a WIA? And we'll keep scrolling. All right. All right, so still some more SOPs. This is just vendor specific. So it wouldn't necessarily be that's something you'd want to upload directly here, but once you download the plan, you can copy and paste your vendor software into this plan or vice versa. What we'll show you at the end, the downloaded template is completely uncustomized, so that you can make it specific to your agency, jurisdiction, company. Load times are a little slow. I apologize for that. All right, so testing, before we get into the actual testing section, just asking about those previous alert systems that you use. How often are you conducting tests? And it just walks you through that first page that you chose and things you should be thinking about. So we can keep scrolling at them. You'll see all of them popped up. So then it asks you about your audit schedule for all of these SOPs. Stakeholders have recommended auditing at least once a year as an example, but that's specific to your agency. All right, so then step 3 is messaging templates. So this is pulled directly from social science research of how an emergency message should be laid out. So we'll scroll a little bit so that people can see the 90-character template. It just walks you through a little bit higher, Adam. Source, what the guidance is, where the hazard is, the termination, and then if you have a URL that points to social media, or it's not recommended to use your agency website, it can't handle the traffic, but your Facebook page, your Twitter page, whatever it is that you want to point people to that has additional information about the emergency event disaster. So you're able to generate as many messages as you want using the template, and it tells you how many characters you've used, how many you have remaining, and it makes it very clear when you've gone over or used characters that won't work in your system. So we'll keep scrolling, and it also does the same thing for 360 character messages, just makes it easy to be able to craft that message depending on events that happen in your jurisdiction. So we'll go to the next page. All right, so then step 4 is just training and system test information. This is directly from FEMA's recommendations on what should be covered for hands-on use training. We'll scroll. There isn't anything much on this page to be able to fill out. It's just if there's anything specific that isn't covered here, you can add it in. We'll save and continue. And I did see a question in the chat from John Lawson about access to the social science research. And it's pulled directly from Dr. Dennis Milletti's prep talk, actually, that he did with S&T, and I can put that in the chat once I'm done presenting. So then step 5 is all about exercises. There's the Homeland Security Exercise and Evaluation Program, so ensuring you're compliant with that. Talking about FCC requirements, the Ipaws Technical Support Services Facility, that monthly required test, after action reports. So all of this is just recommendations. We'll scroll right through, and then ensuring that you're including Ipaws when you do exercises. Test that WIA whenever you have a chance. All right. So then at the end of this page, you will get taken to, we'll just keep scrolling, save and continue. And the last page is the download page. So you have 2 opportunities to download, once at the top and once at the bottom. So it just shows the instructions, how to include your own table of content. And then you have, if you keep scrolling, Adam, you can review the plan and see if there's anything you want to modify before you download. So we'll just pull up that download page, Adam. Perfect. So you can see that it's super, super simple. There isn't any formatting. It's just black and white. The tables show up based on the information you chose, and you can copy and paste any section you want into your existing plan or create a plan from scratch using the toolkit. All right, that's all I had. And I will pass it back to LJ.
So hello, everybody. It looks like I'm unable to access the polling questions right now. So Adam, you can go ahead and move on over to Dr. Jeanette Sutton.
Good afternoon. It was great to hear from Sophie about all of the work that's been done on the toolkit. And I'm really excited to see the outcomes that come from that. So I was asked to prepare a few comments about human behavior in response to warnings. And so I came up with a few points that I wanted to just touch on. So The first point is that people live their lives believing that they are not at risk. And so with some exceptions, such as during periods of calm, most people live their daily lives with a sense of safety. And if we recognize the dangers that we face and the hazards that surround us all day, we would be less likely to get into a vehicle and travel on a freeway. We'd be less likely to ride a bicycle. We'd be less likely to eat red meat, etc. Because everything around us carries a risk. But human beings have developed a set of heuristics and biases that inform our automated assessments of risk. And those help us to determine our level of safety as we go throughout our days. It's because we live with this preconceived notion that we are safe that one of the most difficult things to do with a warning message is to motivate people to take action. That leads to my second point. A primary warning challenge is to motivate people to take protective action. Research on protective action decision-making has led to a model that includes environmental cues, social cues, information cues, receiver characteristics, as well as the warning message itself. The characteristics of the message receiver will affect the motivation, especially their prior experience of the threat. That includes their perceptions of the threat, and also the situational factors and impediments that, like having a dependent or a child that you have to care for, as well as access to resources at the time of the event. So when a person is exposed to the message and they actually give their attention to that message, which is another primary problem, they have to actually understand its contents and then engage in a number of perceptual activities. So then that leads to my third point, which is decision-making in response to a warning. This is very complex. The perceptions that people have to actually go through first is they have to understand the warning message, who it's from, what the hazard is, who will be affected, and what they should do in response to it. They have to believe that the warning message is true, that the threat is actually taking place at the time and that it will impact the people and the locations around them. They have to personalize the warning and the threat and believe that it's going to personally affect themselves. And then they also need to be able to decide to take an action based upon the contents of the warning. So that whatever they read in that warning message has to inform the actions that they should be taking. So warnings are not interpreted in a vacuum. While they're delivered to individuals, the social process that occurs after a person receives a message is just as important and maybe even more important than the message itself. Because people will delay action to confirm the message and to confirm what they should do in response. And within the warnings research space, we call this milling, which probably many of you are very familiar with. It's confirming that information with people around you to determine what you're going to do in response. So while this webinar and the toolkit is targeted at the idea of reducing warning delay on part of you, the message sender, there is also warning delay on part of the message receiver because of the milling activities that people naturally undertake. So this leads to my next point. Can you go to the next one, please? Which is about withholding warnings. Withholding warnings due to fear about panic or mass evacuation can lead to poor outcomes. There's a number of concerns or fears that are held about how the public message receiver will respond to a warning. These are commonly held. And one of the first concerns is about panic, that people are going to become irrational. They'll be overwhelmed in the situation and unable to respond appropriately. Panic is a word that's used too lightly to describe people's behaviors in a crisis or disaster. What we normally see is not panic, but behavior that's motivated by fear. And the behavior is generally to protect oneself. But the media uses the word panic to describe our normal responses to fearful situations. The concern about panic has led some to choose not to send warning messages, but the longer you delay sending a message, the less time people have to confirm that message, potentially resulting in protective action delays. Another concern that affects warning message dissemination is about mass evacuation or shadow evacuation, where roads become blocked and the people most vulnerable to the threat will become trapped. Evacuation modelers are working on this problem, and some communities are even developing planning documents that take into consideration housing density and travel to evacuate for dangerous conditions such as wildfire. But in regards to warnings, this is actually a reason to send your warning earlier rather than later. The sooner people can make a decision to respond and take action, the sooner they can get out and clear the roads for those who decide later, which are those people who are going to be at greater risk because the risk is more quickly approaching them. My next point is we know how to design messages to increase the likelihood of behavioral change. Behavioral change is generally defined as taking an action to protect oneself from harm. But there's an additional behavioral change that a well-designed message can affect. It can affect the amount of time that people take to confirm the warning prior to taking an action. And one of the ways to make this change is by writing complete warnings that provide the information needed to make decisions without searching for additional information. And one of those tools is in the toolkit. It's the concept map that shows you how to write a 360-character message. My advice to you, follow it. This is research that was conducted with Dennis Maletti in our first study of WIA messages. It was which was funded by DHS S&T. We found evidence showing that messages that include these contents, the hazard, the guidance, the source, the location, and the time, when you include those contents in the particular order that it's laid out in the toolkit, those work better than the messages that do not follow those recommendations. So that leads to my last point, which is pre-planning can make a difference in operational capacity to deliver timely and effective alerts and warnings. Using the toolkit is the first step. Writing messages and getting them approved long before they need to be used is the second step. We recommend taking the time to develop your set of messages that take into account your population, your hazards, and your organizations. You will be most successful if you identify these threats that your community is most vulnerable to and prepare those messages ahead of time. I'd be very happy to take questions in the chat or at the end of our presentation time today, but thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk for a few minutes.
All right, so we do have a polling question here. If anybody is able to see it. Oh, perfect.
Again.
So I've got the results here. 60% of you answered the question, and it looks like 77% have said no, they haven't experienced a delay, but 23% have. And I will stop sharing and we can move forward. And before we move over to Ryan, I do see a question in the chat about best practice pre-scripted messages. If Dr. Sutton wants to speak to that really quickly before we move forward.
This is one of the questions that I've been asked to address at the end of the presentation today. There are best practices that are available for pre-scripted messages, and in the future, there will be some templates that are available as well. So if you stick around for another half an hour, I'll be covering that at the end of the session today.
All right, so now we're going to go right into our next Q&A portion where we'll talk to Wade, Dr. Sutton, and well, not Wade, Dr. Sutton, but we'll talk to Ryan and Ryan Hooray and Dr. Jeanette Sutton. Thank you for being on our panel. Norman, I'm going to go ahead and toss it over to you to begin the Q&A with Ryan Hooray. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, LJ. I want to thank our pilot participant, Ryan Hooray. Ryan, I'm going to start the questions with you. So the first that I have here is, can you tell us about your role at the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency and what that encompasses?
Sure. I'll just give a short background. Hello from the great state of Hawaii. Just some background. I have 25 years of telecommunications. 22 of those years are emergency management. I was currently with the agency since 2011. I previously worked 11 years at the University of Hawaii, a telecommunications program under the College of Social Sciences, Social Science Research Institute. So Dr. Sutton, I hear everything you're saying. I want to get with you after. I have the same following, so I want to get with you. And thank you for your whole presentation. I also had a role in emergency management with the University of Hawaii also. We mainly dealt with the U.S. territories and compact states Pacific Basin. So transitioning to, the state of Hawaii itself, it was an easy transition. With the agency, currently Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, I'm in charge of alert and warnings in the state. We also, besides Ipods, we also have one of the largest, if not the largest, outdoor siren warning network in the world for public safety. We have over 400 sirens. For Ipods itself, I'm the primary and technical point of contact, and I work very closely with the project management team in Washington, D.C. from Ipaws, as well as the Jody's team in the lab in Maryland. Very happy to be here.
Appreciate that. Since we were talking about alerting delays, can you tell us some of your most memorable incidents or alerting delay stories over the past few years?
Sure. So, contrary to popular belief, my most memorable alert delay story actually deals with lava. Almost, 4 years to this date, in May of 2018, the Kilauea East Rift Zone eruption occurred in Puna on the Big Island. I was on leave with a group of friends in San Diego, and I got a call from one of my counterparts from the Big Island, the Hawaii County EOC, and he was en route to Leilani Estates subdivision, and he had his red lights flashing and his sirens was blazing, and he was like, "You're not going to believe this. There's lava flowing into the streets of Leilani." And I'm like, "No ways! You can't believe it." No, I couldn't believe my ears. My family's from the Big Island. I grew up going and watching all the past eruptions over the years, and I just couldn't believe that it was actually erupting in the neighborhood. We jumped to action. He got there, he confirmed it. He got his laptop out, and we were like, okay, we got to sound the sirens and we got to send out some Ipaws alerts. And this is the actual first alert that Hawaii County actually sent out, and it was for lava. And it was, it was a few months just after the incident that happened in Hawaii that you guys all know of. And they knew that the system works, and they said, "Hey, let's do it." So talking about alert delays, we're scrambling and said, "Okay, what are we going to do? What event code are we going to use?" I said, "Okay, we know what event code." And the really tricky part at that time was the character, 90 characters. Everyone thinks 90 characters is a lot. Now we have 360, which is very, it's a lot more characters to deal with than 90. 90 is maybe too little. 360 might be too much. You got to think about, a cell phone and how much does someone actually read on a cell phone when they actually look at their phone? They probably read the first 10 sentences, 10 words, excuse me. So we started thinking about that. We only had 90, so to stay within 90, what do we say? Be short and concise. We have to draw polygons. We drew a polygon all over the affected area, and we issued it. We issued that alert, sounded the sirens, and we used the system probably, I think, around 12 times in the next 30 days to do evacuations and health safety information notices. It worked. I'm glad to be part of it. I also got deployed to the Big Island, not only for alert and warning to support that, but we also did some safety operations out in the area, making sure that all the first responders and the public had safe access to the area. And like I said, we used the Ipaws system to do so.
Appreciate it. Wade, over to you.
Oh, another one. Yeah, so another one was actually in 2018 itself. This is in Maui County. We had a tropical storm warning in place. Hurricane was inbound. We were all planning for, flooding templates, mudslides. So, okay, well, what we're going to do, each county has their own, different incident that it's going to affect them. And then a brush fire erupts in Maui during a hurricane warning. And we were like, oh my goodness, we have to switch it up. So we went from a flooding template to an evacuation for a brush fire. So, we had to deal with the same things. Okay, we got 90 characters. What do we do? What kind of message do we put out? It goes back to like Dr. Sutton's, research is you want to put a message out and you want to get as fast out as possible, but you want to make sure it's accurate. If it's not accurate, then you may confuse the public. But at the same token, you want to get it out in a timely fashion so the first responders and the public, has ample time to actually respond to the incident or emergency. So we dealt with that same very criteria and challenges, and we got through it. And to date, Maui County, I think that was their first evacuation for fires, for a brush fire. To date, I think they've had 16 Ipaws alerts that they issued just for brush fires. So, the leadership there, as well as the mayor, they saw that it worked and they continue to use it. Same with the Big Island, Big Island, the Hawaii County, they've used it for everything from lava to mudslides, to tropical storms. Same in Maui County, and same with their other two counties. They continue to use it because the system works.
So Ryan, really thank you for being on here. And yes, we have talked many times, right? Since, it's a long time ago. I want to say very early 2015, maybe even earlier. One of the issues I remember that Ryan helped us with was, the Ipods system bounds the alert to the geographic jurisdictions to include the coastline, right? But when you're might need to quickly draw an area to send an alert to, you don't want to follow the coastline. You want to draw a straight square or circle or et cetera. So our system was rejecting some alerts that included area for the alerting target area that went into the coast, out beyond the coastline, which we had to fix. So, but the other thing that's very unique, I think, Ryan, with Hawaii, the way states, our FEMA stuff comes through the state or to a nation first, and then the states manage, or the tribal authorities manage local access to the system. So, today we have more than 1,600, almost 1,700 authorities or agencies that have access, and the large majority of them are local at the permission of their state or in coordination with their state or tribal government. But and many of the states, there are a few states that handle the whole load for their local authorities. Mostly it's the smaller states in the Northeast, but they do it on a request basis for the local authorities. So the local authorities call the state. But you have I believe in Hawaii, a program where you actually allow locals, unbeknownst to or behind your state access, to use the system to send alerts. As you mentioned, Maui as one of the counties that is sending under the Hawaii umbrella. But I think you also uniquely have like a requirement that they demonstrate to you their readiness, right? Which was the goal of this template too, was to help or to give local agencies especially, and some states, a tool to help them quickly develop kind of a program for how they're going to send alerts and what they're going to do, as we find that turnover is a large problem, especially at local agencies. So if you could talk about that a little bit. Has this toolkit, or had you already had something in place where you requested that the local authority document some things and then demonstrate to you the ability to use it effectively before allowing them to send alerts independently of the state?
Yeah, thank you, Wade. So the state of Hawaii has been participating in the EAS program since 1997. And we've been very proactive in using the system and testing the system. Primarily, we've been very proactive in using it for Amber alerts and Mighty alerts. Fortunately, we haven't had to use it as much as we, did in the past. I think we've only issued 2 Amber Alerts itself. They've been successful. But yeah, in the state of Hawaii, we're very unique, and in the sense of we actually have an umbrella where the counties actually fall under the state, and we work as a team. We have, it goes back to HRS 127 Alpha, which is emergency management. It's kind of like an umbrella network, as you said. So the state of Hawaii allows the counties to use the system. In the beginning, we would actually do all the templates and we would issue it. They would call us, and me or my team or one of our 27 warning officers would assist the county itself and issue the alert or helping them with the templates. Now, they actually do it themselves, which I'm very happy for. They actually call me thereafter and say, hey, I just issued an alert. And I'm like, great. Going back, 2014, 2015, when I actually met Wade and his team, I was very fortunate, unlike other smaller, maybe county EOCs or state EOCs or city EOCs that weren't able to go to emergency management conferences, that I was able to go meet Wade, meet his team, go down to Washington, DC. There wasn't a toolkit back then. We actually had to make our own toolkit in the state of Hawaii. So I'm very fortunate, very happy that the toolkit's here now for our current users and future users to come.
Hi, Ryan, it's Jody. How are you?
Hello, Jody.
I have one question. I know you have been involved with the toolkit a lot with development. And speaking of all of these incidents, Maui, the lava, et cetera, I'm sure you've changed SOPs and updated your standard operating procedures. Did anywhere in the toolkit give you guidance or help you with how you amended those SOPs or your guidelines?
Good question, Jody. So a lot of it came from my input, and a lot of it, I looked at it, I guess, came from your guys' input. And we took that back and we did, review our SOPs and implement it accordingly. So we found it very useful also. Thank you.
All right, so now that we've kind of wrapped it up with Ryan, thank you. We're going to go ahead and turn it all the way over to Dr. Jeanette Sutton. Norman, you can go ahead and start us off.
Sure will. So as LJ alluded to and Dr. Sutton a bit earlier, we're going to segue a little bit to a Q&A segment with Dr. Jeanette Sutton, who works with the College of Emergency Preparedness, Homeland Security, and Cybersecurity at the University of Albany, SUNY. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Sutton for participating today. Dr. Sutton, can you tell us a little bit about your role at the University of Albany?
Sure. Well, thank you. So I'm an associate professor in the college. We call it CEHC because it's a long title. But I'm also the director of the Emergency and Risk Communication Message Testing Lab. And this is a lab that conducts research on topics such as earthquake early warnings, false alerts, and post-alert messaging. That's with funding from USGS. We look at how to communicate risk using visual images, including maps, and funded by NOAA. How to communicate about complex risks using indices and dashboards. That's also funding from NOAA. But the biggest project that we're working on right now is funded by FEMA Ipaws. And that project is to develop what we call a message design dashboard that will enable authorized alerting authorities to more effectively create short messages that could be sent out over WIA and other channels. So that's just a little bit about what we're up to.
Great. Actually, I was on a panel with Antoine a number of months back, and he certainly touted that it was forthcoming. How can emergency managers prepare for accidental alerts and cancellation of alert messages?
So the short answer to this is emergency managers need to develop and vet messages that could be set out quickly after the initial mistaken message. That delay in sending out that follow-up message can create a lot of concern and angst for people if they truly believe that the message that was originally sent was meaningful and that they actually needed to take action. But the longer answer is that cancellation messages need to be developed for more than just accidental or false alerts. This is going to require some additional thought because we need to be aware that with so many types of organizations using Ipaws and the WIA channel in particular, there could be a lot of messages going out, warning messages as well as cancellation messages. So my concern is that without thinking this through about how the channel is used by so many different organizations that, and as with the follow-up messages too, that people might be more inclined to turning it off. So we need to think really carefully about cancellation messages. But from my work on earthquakes, we've looked at post-alert messages that are designed to go out after an earthquake early warning that was sent as a false alert, which actually did happen in the state of California a few years ago. The thing that we found is that the primary message that people need to know is that they are no longer at risk. So if a second message is going to be sent out to alert people, especially if it's being sent in the middle of the night, it needs to be to tell them that they can come out from underneath the table and that they're safe. And so developing those messages ahead of time, getting them approved by people up the chain of command and knowing that they're ready to go to cancel that message and help people to know that they're safe. That's how you can prepare for addressing those.
Great, over to you.
Thank you. Hey, so as Dr. Sutton knows, we met a few years ago as well. And, we in the Ipaws program, initially our focus was really systems focus, was getting the systems online, especially the newer capabilities, wireless emergency alerts. But we didn't anticipate, and we perhaps didn't lean in on resources to, once the system was out there and we had a sizable number of agencies online, their hesitation in using it because they needed help with what should the message say, right? And how should I use this to be effective? To the end goal really is to impact some public safety in a positive way, right? Get people out of the way and then provide them emergency information that helps them keep themselves safe. So given that little bit, what other challenges and what are the challenges really with continuing to provide those authorities with the education, I guess is the right word, or guidance to really know how to effectively write messages that obtain that objective?
So I think, that you've identified one of those primary challenges, but one of the main ways I think of overcoming these challenges is planning and training and practicing. When messages need to be sent, there's delays at all the different levels of warning, and that includes getting the information from the fields, that you have the accurate information about the lava flowing down the streets, where that area is that's being affected, who's being affected, getting that information from the field to the message writer, assuming that those are different people. The message writer needs to be skilled and knowledgeable and also able to construct an effective message. And that does take some training and some thinking through and some building out of templates based upon the hazards that the community is most aware of their potential impact, but also able to shift in the case that you think that you're warning for a hurricane, but then it becomes a wildfire, such as what Ryan was talking about. Having those plans ahead of time to construct those messages and shift really fast. But then also we need to have plans and training and practice for the message sender so that they can actually identify the specific channel that they're going to use and disseminate those messages, and having all of those approvals in place ahead of time, because often there's so many different layers of approval that need to be met before the message can be sent. So it's really the whole system, and it requires a lot of time to be spent to prepare ahead of time. I think that using the toolkit I'm not being a cheerleader here, but in some ways I am, because spending the time working through that toolkit is going to help people to think through all of these different questions that need to be addressed before you have to send those messages. And so I think this is going to help to overcome some of those challenges that have been identified.
And Dr. Sutton, following on that, hello, how are you?
Hi, Jody.
That you're speaking my language, practice, training, exercising here at the lab or here at the technical support services. That's where you can practice all of that here. You can build a plan, I'm going to give a shout out to our website because we now have scenario-based monthly proficiency demonstrations loaded and automated where you can go check it out. It's there today where you can pull up different scenarios to practice. But one question I get here, and I want to ask you through your research, is how do you add, or where should you concentrate on the features of that message or add emphasis to help people take action?
So there's a couple of pieces within the contents that are going to be really, really important to focus on. The two that I think are vital is understanding what the hazard is and the consequences to people. And also understanding what people need to do to protect themselves. So those actions that they need to take. I know that one of the things that people struggle with is creating language around the geographical space that the hazard is potentially going to affect, especially with those real uncertain, fast moving hazards like a wildfire. And that location information is really vital. So that is an additional challenge that we need to work on some more to figure out how to best communicate that information, but talking about the hazard and its consequences as well as what people need to do. So when I look at historical messages that have been sent out, I see that some messages do not include any information about the threat. It only says something like evacuate now. It doesn't tell people why. And when people receive a message that's incomplete, they're going to delay action because they don't understand what is taking place in the environment and why they're being told to act. And this could be more problematic for those who don't understand the WIA system in general. They don't understand why the message is coming to their phone. They don't understand why they're being woken up and by whom. And so public education becomes really important. But in addition to telling people what the hazard is, they also need to know what to do in response. So when people are missing that protective action information, which I see frequently in messages that are sent, they're also going to search for information to confirm what they should do. And that delays action in addition. So those two are the things that I would emphasize. What is the hazard and its consequences? What is it going to do to the people who are in the way of the risk? And also, what do they need to do to protect themselves?
Great. Yep, I agree. Thanks.
Hey, for the future too, I hope I'm not butting in front of somebody else, but you know, we're learning to, the Ipaws program, you know, we think system, well, people are part of that system too. And we're looking at a lot of technologies to evolve how information gets in front of people. That's evolving very quickly, regardless of whether we lean into it or not, right? With next generation TV and streaming and et cetera. But I think where else, how will we leverage that, or what are things that we need to be aware of? I assume the public's perception and their attentions are changing too. So how do you see alerting going in the future? How do we lean in to continue to make things better?
Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the message design dashboard, because that's an idea for the future, which is based upon the needs that you all have said is a real need. And I think I saw that in the chat also. So this is a project that Wade and Jody, you're very familiar with because you've been part of this for the last 2 years, getting it off the ground. But we're working on the message design dashboard. It's a project that's funded through your office. And what we've done thus far in the last 6 months is built out a lexicon of contents that describe the hazard and its impacts, the consequences on people, and the protective actions that go along with those different hazards. We've vetted these with subject matter experts, with hazard subject matter experts, and we've worked also with message design experts. And that lexicon is going to be ingested into software that a person can sit at their computer and kind of like, think of Mad Libs, where it gives you the open space and you drop down from that drop down menu the contents that will fill in the blanks so that people will have the tools at their fingertips to write a message without having to go through all of the additional thinking through what might I say about this particular hazard and what are the impacts that I need to think about, because all that information will be provided right there. This is a project that we are going to begin public message testing within the next couple of months. So we will have a number of templates that have been tested with the public. Those will be part of it, but the software is being designed. We will be going through usability testing, engaging with probably some of the people who are on this call, because we've been conducting interviews with experts also, and hopefully rolling this out within the next 18 months, we hope. But it's a project that we're really excited about, and I know that it's going to make a real difference. So in addition to that, as I think about ideas of the future, I guess I focus less on the new technologies that are coming on board and more about how to make those technologies work well. So when I think about what we are doing with the message design dashboard, which will help people to write messages for all of the different alerting channels that they're using that are short messaging, I also think about things that we're not doing. We need to test and develop templates for multiple languages. We're focusing on English. I've seen questions in the chat about people with access and functional needs. How can we include that population in designing messages so that when they are accessing these channels, they're getting the best information that they can use to make their decisions? I'm really interested in thinking about how do we incorporate visual imagery into messages? The use of icons, there's been some interest in that, but how do we identify and design icons that are universally understood, or at least getting to the point where 80% of the population can see them and recognize them and they're a cue to action? I know there's been an interest in thinking and adding maps to wireless emergency alerts. Well, there's a lot of research that we need to do around that to help to make them the best possible map and geographical information for people to act on. And it may differ from hazard to hazard. So we have to think about all of those different things. So while my dream would be that we have these amazing new technological advances, holograms even, which would be far into the future, but look at where we are today, where we have a computer that we carry around in our pocket. We didn't think this was possible, but here we are. As we think about that in the far future, it's the thinking about how to improve it so that we start with the basis of human beings and their use of these technologies and build from there. That would be my favorite idea for the future, is we start from what people need and build out from there. But thanks for your questions.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Okay, so now that we've had our Q&A with the experts, with Dr. Jeanette Sutton and Ryan Hooray, thank you so much for your information and just helping this panel become a strong panel and informing the public with your knowledge. Without further ado, Sophie, let's do one of our polling questions. So if you can see it, it says, has your agency used the Ipaws program planning toolkit? That's a very important question, by the way, yes or no. We'd love to hear if any of your agencies have been using the Ipaws program planning toolkit. And we're going to give you a minute to answer this. Again, has your agency used the Ipaws program planning toolkit yet? And if you haven't, what are you waiting for? Isn't that right, Ryan? And again, and I repeat it one more time, has your agency used the Ipaws program planning toolkit? Oh, wow. So yes, 22%, no, 78%, 78%, what are you waiting for? We are happy that you're using it from the 22%, but we want to see more higher numbers. So hopefully as we continue to do these webinars with our experts, with Ryan Hooray, Dr. Jeanette Sutton, and Norman, Jody, and Wade, we will increase those numbers. without further ado, Norman, you want to go ahead and toss it over to our Q&A portion with the audience. Adam, you will go ahead and lead this, looking at the Q&A section and begin the questions to our expert panelists.
Yeah, as LJ says, we just want to loop everyone in. So audience, please give us your questions, direct it to anybody you'd like or to no one in particular, and we'll pick somebody to answer them. And so Adam will help us administer that, if you don't mind, sir.
Yes, thank you, Norman. We've had a bunch of really good questions come through both the Q&A section and the chat. So we'll try to get through as many as we can. The first question is, with large-scale public events returning this spring and summer, are there any marketing campaigns informing the public about how alerting messages may affect large-scale events?
Anyone want to answer this question?
Wade or Jody, anything you guys are aware of in terms of marketing campaigns? Either, if not at the federal level, anything that you're aware of with local partners?
No, I mean, we have that on our to-do list. We've seen urging of that from both our friends in Congress and hearing that from, it's a matter of fact, it was one of the recommendations, and we had an Ipods subcommittee to the FEMA National Advisory Committee back in 2016. And so resources and a way to do that. We expect some of that to be coming our way in future years budget requests. So, but today from a wide scale outreach, I mean, we did a minimal one public service announcement that may still be out there. I don't think you're seeing it too much way back in 2014. And it primarily focused on just getting the sound that the phone makes out to the public. So perhaps some future collaboration also with the FCC and changes, and don't have a good answer for it now other than noted. And that is something that we're trying to figure out how to do as we go in the future, as well as just produce materials that can be used by local authorities to communicate with their people, to give the folks in your jurisdiction some how you want to talk to them in an emergency may be the most effective going forward as well. And we need to help you with that.
Thank you, Wade. The next question reads, these alerts are broadcast to many people, but is FEMA Ipods working on standardizing the messages in a way that is useful for others to consume from a technology/IoT standpoint?
Yeah, I'd say we think we're in a pretty good position from the technology piece with the Common Alert Protocol, with the XML standard formats, and the ability to use various other pieces like info blocks or content within there that can be passed to technologies as they come online. So right now, all connectivity into and out of Ipods is happening on standard internet communication paths and protocols. The bigger thing, I think, for consistent messaging is the work with Dr. Sutton and looking at how do we develop common messaging that is used for similar or the same hazard activities across the country. Today, that's not necessarily true. And of course, use of the system is not consistent as you travel across the country. Some agencies, some local authorities have really leaned in, and their public's kind of learning how this works. And in other places, it's not used very widely. And then the messages that are sent can vary widely what is going. So consistency from that, I think we're well positioned. We do think about that. How are we going to, as the Internet of Things comes online and is more viable, we think our core technology is positioned very well to leverage that. Now, the next piece is those messages have to make sense when people get them so that they can take action to get out of harm's way.
I can sort of amplify that from a research perspective. We're working with Wade and the Ipods office to explore ways to get to deal with the wildland urban interface and specifically dealing with navigation apps to get evacuation information in the hands of publicly available or publicly utilized applications in a way that routes from the area, routes to avoid the area. And honestly, to Wade's point, we are using the standard CAP message in that regard. And although I think over time, we will get some feedback on how that might be modified, or how it might be easily a little easier to ingest. But to date, we haven't really gotten a whole lot of pushback on the presentation or the content. Everyone seems to be able to deal with it at the moment.
Okay, thank you guys, great information. We are running a little low on time, so we have time for one, maybe two more questions, but there was a very good question that came through that I wanted to make light of. The question is, were any persons with disabilities / access and functional needs asked for input in regards to the Ipods toolkit?
I'll take that one, and then if there's anybody from Ipods who wants to speak up as well. Yes, short answer. We had a focus group with a diverse group of people with disability advocates not long ago. And so we will be including some of those suggestions and updates before the end of our contract in September. Things like states including silver alerts, which are for the elderly who are missing, and ensuring that the technology on the back end, I saw someone's comment about like the scroll for EAS going, but no audio. And so making sure those little tweaks are for every message that is sent, so that it's a whole community approach to emergency alerting.
And I'll just echo that. Yes, and we did one seminar, actually, that wasn't part of this one, was it? Where we are engaging with kind of the organizations and thought leaders in that community, looking for, hey, how can we do this better in the future? And it is always every year on our piece to look at how we can improve that. To include, working with, I'll call the emergency alert system, what you get on radio and TV, really a legacy system. We're really leaning in with various organizations and the FCC to hopefully make alerts on television much more accessible for a broader community than what it is today within the given rules for the emergency alert system. So absolutely, we've been, I think we have some Johns Hopkins folks that were part of another FEMA project working on some ideas. We're still waiting for some proposals back from them, but always a challenge and always high on our list to find better ways to do that.
Okay, thank you guys. I think we actually have time to squeeze in one more quick question. The last question will be, are there any best practices for identifying the primary alerting authority for a jurisdiction? We are struggling with finding a department that is willing to take on the responsibility.
I don't think I have I'll take a shot at that. I don't have a perfect answer for that, but again, collaboration with your state agency, we can help you with contacting the point of contact that we use for Ipaws to validate or coordinate or collaborate with the local authorities' request for access. And then the next piece we would look at is within the Ipaws system, if you're using Ipaws, even if there is a jurisdiction that is neighboring or further away, if they potentially can take on or will support sending alerts to a different area, that's easily done within the system to allow them to have access to a broader geographic area to be able to send alerts.
Like maybe I can chime in on that also. It just depends on the agency itself. Building partnerships is the key to success in emergency management and public safety itself. Hawaii County has their SOPs, Maui County has their SOPs, Oahu City County, Honolulu and Hawaii County itself. Some places, some agencies may require up to the mayor to approve a template. Some may be the police chief, some may be the managing director, some may be the administrator for emergency management. It's just about building those partnerships. I think you're going to share my contact information. I'm willing to share any of our best practices with any of the participants. it really varies, and having those in place ahead of time is critical and crucial. Don't try to make that decision when you have to send the alert out in the next 10 minutes. So just build those partnerships and identify those people that need to make those decisions. And I believe the Ipaws Toolkit, it will help you with that. So if you haven't participated in it, please jump on that bandwagon. You know, while the timeliness of an alert is very important, you need to balance that with the concise accuracy of information and exercise best practices. You know, going back to what Dr. Sutton said, you know, using a protective action decision model, which we follow in the state of Hawaii, you know, coming from, you know, working at the University of Hawaii, you know, it's a research study on one's response to an environment hazards and disasters, and it analyzes how people actually receive, interpret, and respond to emergency. You know, you're going to say, okay, evacuate now. You know, where do they go? You know, is your message going to actually create more panic than it is for, you know, protective information? So you need to balance that out and know what kind of information you're going to send out ahead of time. Thank you. Sorry, I probably overstepped my end here, but mahalo to the female Ipaws team as well as everyone on the panel. Just wanted to say thank you to everybody, especially Corner Alliance team.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. I would just like to echo that. Thank you for all of our panelists for answering those questions and putting in your input. We are running low on time, so I will actually send this back to LJ to wrap this up.
So Adam, could you go to our slide for save the date for the users conference for Ipaws?
Awesome. Slide before.
Oh, it must be gone. So go ahead, Norman. You can go ahead and slide on over to the last slide, and you can do the users conference, and I'll go ahead and put in the information in the chat.
Okay, just before we come to a close, we wanted to remind everyone that there's to join us for the Ipaws user conference. It's on July 27th. More will be posted on the FEMA website soon. This virtual conference is aimed at providing alerting authorities with the tools and skills needed to create effective alerts and become competent Ipaws users. The conference offers opportunities to learn more about the Ipaws lab and its capabilities, and we hope to see you all there virtually. Also, if you want to learn more about the Ipaws planning toolkit, please contact me or Wade using the featured emails here, and we'll get you set up with all the tools you need to get started. Our team would also like to, we want to reiterate that we'll be sending out the slides and recordings to everyone who joined or is registered for this webinar. And we certainly appreciate you joining us today and hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists.
I want to reiterate, thanks everyone. Thank you to all of our panelists, Norman, Wade, Jody, Ryan, Dr. Jeanette Sutton, our very own Sophie, Adam for doing the Q&A and navigating that. And thank you especially to the audience for taking some time to come and listen and get this information from the experts. If we did not have a chance to answer some of your questions, we will make sure that we will get those questions to the panelists afterwards. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. We're leaving at 2:18, so we're going to let you guys get back your time. If you had anything else that you had to do, thank you for making us a part of your time, and let's go ahead and close on out. Bye, everybody.